Welcome to The State of Us. Real people with honest opinions and the future of responsible media. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Stories during the holidays certainly are not a new concept, but in the age of social media, do kids, or adults for that matter, actually pay attention to these stories? Well, according to an article in the Wall Street Journal, more than 90%, yes, 90%, 9 out of 10 teenagers and young adults can retell family stories when asked, even if they seem uninterested when the stories were told, according to a 2018 study. So, why you care? Well, there's such a high percentage of people that have the ability to retell these stories when they're told. You're going to learn that throughout this episode that these stories not only help instill a sense of identity, but actually are proven to provide better coping skills for young adults through college and as they go into their first jobs. Numerous studies indicate just that. But of course, we couldn't begin this critical conversation without
your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
I just find it amazing that people don't do this, because in the article they give you hints on how to start doing this. I guess being raised in a Southern home, telling stories was just part of the daily life, but totally enamored with the article, because it finally proves what I've been saying all along, that there are ways to give kids tools to deal with some of these emotions besides pills. And it's actually give them some connections with their family.
Well, and the interesting thing here too, right, is that while this is focused and the initial release of this is on Thanksgiving of 2019, this applies all the time.
Sure.
It just so happens that typically when most people tell more stories and when more people are willing to listen to said stories are around the holidays.
Right.
People aren't in quite as much a hurry on that particular day. But the point, all of this data isn't specific to you have to wait until the holidays to do it, right? So the best holiday stories, according to the article, are funny or entertaining and often convey life lessons. According to a psychology professor and director of Emory University's Institute for the Liberal Arts, quote, they have a very important function in teaching children that I belong here. I'm part of these stories. They provide not just a script for life, but a set of values and guideposts.
And I think what's important is many times we need to talk about the older generation to the younger generation, even if the older generation isn't there. And as I'm getting older, I realize the importance of that, because now at many family gatherings with my mom and dad both deceased, I'm the one who's the oldest one there and telling stories, not just about them, but then also about grandparents or great grandparents that nobody's ever met. And then I've got connections to what would be the youngest generation to their great grandparents who were my great grandparents. And those stories were told to me. And now I'm that person that's responsible to tell those stories. So it was really important that they were told when I was 6, 7, 8 years old about those people, because now I can continue to share them. And it's part of, too, when you talk about that history perspective, oral tradition that so many, societies have. If they don't have a written history, they have an oral history. And this is an important part of creating a family unit, right? Right. And not just mom and dad, but the family, that there are people that you can turn to when you're in need.
Yeah. And that's and I think part of what this points out is it's biological or otherwise, right?
Exactly.
I mean, they don't have to necessarily be quote unquote flesh and blood family. It has more to do with the group of people you're close to, sharing things and the meaning they have. And that's part of what you get that is an underlying theme, I think, from this. Tell me if you disagree, Lance, is that it's not so much the particulars of the story that are important. It's the meaning of the story that's important.
Right.
So whether or not Lance perfectly recounts every detail exactly the way it happened or not, that's not important. not nearly as important as what it means to Lance,
Right.
what he took away from it, what others take away from it. right?
Exactly.
And in fact, it's not just about building identity, but there's real evidence to suggest researchers in another study asked families with 10 to 12-year-old children to reminisce about happy and negative experiences, then followed up 2 years later. Children whose parents explained negative emotions and how they resolved them had better social skills and academic skills. So not only did they perform better in social situations, could interact with other people better, but they actually got better grades.
Well, and why would that be? Well, because they've learned that having these feelings and these emotions are okay. Number one, that I'm not weird or different because I have these feelings, but that I've also now been given ways to solve said feelings and emotions correctly and incorrectly because, it's, you tell a story and you tell a story on yourself. It's like, yeah, I did this and I got in trouble, and then ding, 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 the bell goes off. Maybe I better not react the same way that, Uncle Lance did, or, the same way that my dad did, or the same way my grandfather did. But then by the same token, you tell a story where it worked out, then when they get in that situation, A, they don't feel uncomfortable, and B, they're like, hey, wait a minute. This is what happened to Aunt Susie. And when she got in this situation, she did this and it worked out, and they have something to draw from in their toolbox of emotions, and it works out for them, and it's like, wow, it did work, and those are the important things that people, because so many times they're running around and I don't know what to do. Nobody's ever talked about this before. I don't know. I've never felt this emotion before. And when you find out that other people have it, it's like, oh, okay.
Yep.
And then it's okay. And then it validates
and how people
everything.
dealt with it.
Right. And then you feel better.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the only one that's ever felt this way.
Well, and the author of the article points out too, goes on to explain from that study that family stories also can serve as antidotes for the pressures that many teens feel to get good grades, get into elite colleges, and land immediately on the established career path. And the point here is that if you ask your family around the table, it's probably pretty likely that you'll hear several stories of it didn't go quite that way for them.
Exactly.
Or at least the road bumps along the way. And just as we're pointing out with the emotions and stuff, the same thing applies here. This conveys that just because things don't go exactly the way you envision them going doesn't mean that all is lost and the world has fallen apart. And you might even pick up ways of, well, so-and-so did this, so I'm going to try to do that now. Now I have an idea about, well, that sounds interesting. Maybe I'll give that a try. And
even not only with family, but then as in the classroom as a teacher, I would tell kids all the time, I wasn't the perfect student and never claimed to be. Mm-hmm. And, we were talking in here pre-show production and, National Honor Society and all this kind of stuff. And I just kind of kept quiet, but I wasn't even close.
Yeah.
I didn't meet the requirements or the demands or whatever, but yet I've been successful, and so I think kids need to hear that there is more than one path.
Right.
Cause my daughters would both tell you, it's like, I look at them and I go, well, why are you still in school? Why are you so worried about education? And it's like, then, they kind of just look at me like, well, that's all you and mom did while we were growing up. And they've both said, we never discussed about going to college. We just figured it was an expectation. Because in the talking of the family, well, granddad went to college, grandma went to college, you and mom went to college. So it was just like, it was going to happen. To them, it wasn't a discussion as if, it was just where and what was I going to study, which we never had that discussion. We never forced them. I mean, because I'm a big believer, as people, listeners on the show know, there's a lot of different ways to get to where you want to get,
Yep.
where you want to go. But, through stories, my children just figured they were going to college.
Yeah. I mean, I think, when I look at school, it's like, well, I wasn't a bad student, I don't think. I mean, I didn't cause problems for teachers.
I did.
But I always looked at, because it's just how I approach life. I learned the rules of the system and I did everything I could to meet the rules the easiest way possible, which actually took a good bit of work to figure out, so there's the irony of figuring out how to game the system actually requires.
I learned the
effort.
rules and figured out how to break them without trying to get caught.
Oh, okay. But like I think probably 90%, if not higher, of my classmates all took chemistry.
Right.
I did not.
Right.
Still graduated. And I spent 2 years in psychology classes that didn't exist at our school.
Right.
Until I found a way to create them. And I was the only student in those classes, you know, because I would have rather done those things and I didn't want to do chemistry.
Yep.
And there were rules in place that allowed, you know, the avoidance of that stuff. So I guess the point is that, you know, it is to say there's more than one path, but that's part of the benefit of,
but it's good to hear
of these type of stories. Right. And in a 2008 study, researchers at Emory quizzed 40 children ages 10 to 14 on 20 family history questions, such as how did their parents meet or where their grandparents grew up. Those who answered more questions correctly showed on separate assessments less anxiety and fewer behavioral problems. So think about this. Right. So you asked them 20 questions about their family's history.
Yep.
The ones that answered more of family history questions correctly, less anxiety, less behavioral problems.
Because they feel connected to that group, or, you know, to use the word, and I'll spell it, you know, clan with a C. Okay. Mm-hmm. That they feel connected to a larger group of people, to a larger community. And therefore that gives you comfort. It's like, I know that if things fall apart, like if I'm not feeling well today and I've got a lot of cooking to do, if things fall apart on me, I know that my daughters and my wife and my brother and sister-in-law and my nieces will all come in and they'll get dinner on the table.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's just,
everybody will still eat. They'll still have a good time.
It's going to happen. Yeah. You know, we're all there for each other. And we, while we enjoy the food at Thanksgiving, we enjoy the togetherness because it's a very busy time of the year for them and for both of our families. And to get together and spend time talking is just what we look forward to. The food is delicious, but it's secondary. It'll just be the camaraderie of getting it all together is the fun. So there's plenty more to share on this, I think, very fascinating topic. It is one our interns in the booth today gave us kind of a look about doing this particular episode. Like, what? What are you talking about? Retelling family? But we'll talk about it in the second segment of a young man their age now.
Yes.
Who leaned on these stories and now has become successful in his career choice.
Yeah. So there's more to come. Lance and I are going to share some of our own stories, but also some more messages from this particular article. Before we do that, Lance, why are we taking time to talk about this today?
Well, because here at TrueChat, our mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations.
The benefits of retelling family stories. More to come. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
In a 2018 study, researchers quizzed 40 children ages 10 to 14 on 20 family history questions. Those that answered more questions correctly showed less anxiety and fewer behavioral problems. The benefits of retelling family stories, they're not just sentimental, they're absolutely real. And that's why we're talking about it today. I think a nice message for the holidays, but also very important and backed up by evidence and research. Yes, Lance?
Yes, it is. It's nice to know that the thoughts and feelings I've had for years now, the professionals say
that's kind of
is good.
That's kind of what that's the theme of The State of Us, right?
Isn't it?
Just go along every few episodes, we find something and it's like, man, I'm so glad we found this data that says exactly what I've thought for.
I knew I was right. Now I've got proof to back it up.
Now I've got proof. So you can just point to when people say, how do you know you're right? Well, go listen to The State of Us.
That's right.
Right. So let's talk some about family stories, shall we?
Okay.
You have one from the article you want to share?
Well, we kind of teased it, but with our interns, they're about this age, and this young man was 19, and he was offered a chance to go to Los Angeles and work in the film industry as an intern one summer. And he was like, yeah, that's really crazy. Here I am 19. I don't have a job. I'm just going to go to LA and just hang out. I mean, I don't know what to do. And he remembered as a young boy listening at the table to talks of his grandparents and things that they had done and career choices they had made and chances that they had taken. And even though while I tried to get out of these stories, I didn't like to listen to them. I'm like, oh, really? I got to sit here. I just want to go play with my cousins or whatever. But he drew on those stories 10 years later and he said, well, my grandfather took a chance and he was successful. So why not? I mean, it's in my family's past, that we take chances every once in a while. And he took a chance and now he's in New York and in cinematography and doing exactly what he wanted because he took a chance when he was 19. And one of the main reasons he took that chance was because he had heard stories about his grandparents who during the Depression, or I forget exactly what the situation was, but they had taken chances and it had turned out okay for them. So they gave him the confidence to try something out of the norm, which is huge, which is exactly what we're talking about is when you hear that other people have tried something that you're thinking of doing and they survived it, either in a funny way, a sad way, a good way, whatever. Wow, they made it through. They tried it and they came out okay on the other end. That's important. And especially when it comes from, it's not somebody you read in a book, but it's somebody that you can relate to or who came from your bloodline or your family line.
So, let's move into, some personal stories, Lance, shall we?
I don't know where to go. I mean, cause my kids know all my stories, but our listeners don't. And grandpa's stories. Well, I told you one earlier right off air that, we were talking about jingles and change and things like that. And I remember when I was 3 and 4 years old, my grandfather, who worked for the Forest Department, a CCC job during the Great Depression, he was big on men carrying change in their pocket. He said, because that way you're not a vagrant. You're not going to be a bum. And so when I was 3 and 4 years old, he would always hand me a couple pennies or a couple coins and have me put them in my pocket. And I remember putting them in my pocket and, playing around with those coins in my fingers and taking them home and always having. And he said, you need that because people need to know that you're a man of stature, that you're not a bum, that you're not walking the streets with no money, which for him was a big deal during the Depression. There were, soup lines and bread lines and things like that. And he never was lucky enough that he didn't have to do that. He didn't have a lot because he was working in one of, FDR's, alphabet soup government jobs, but he was able to take care of things and he always had money in his pocket. And I think about that now because that's what I'm known for around, the school and everything else. I've always carrying cash and I've always got change and I save all my change now and I roll it and I take it in for money, and my kids laugh. They go, Dad, our inheritance is wrapped up in your dresser. And I'm like, yeah, there's some truth to that. But I think it all stems from my grandfather looking at me as a little boy and saying, here, you need to always have money in your pocket.
Don't ever be broke.
because that means you can walk around with your head held high and you can take part in society. And it's just, it's just part of my core being. And it happened when I was, 3 and 4 or 5 years old before it was preschool.
Yeah. In the vein of, in the name of grandpa's, I guess, mine actually was, he enlisted in the Army Air Corps back before there was a United States Air Force, when World War II started.
Right.
And he wanted to go be a fighter pilot, and do his part. And when he got to his assignment, they said, well, we don't need more pilots. We got plenty of them. We need more mechanics because the planes are being shot down so fast and damaged so fast that we're not keeping up. We got plenty of people to fly and we don't have nearly enough people to fix them. So he became a mechanic. And not too long after he had started, working as a mechanic, he was on an airplane wing working on it. A pilot didn't know he was there and started taxiing and he fell off and injured his back. And he spent months in an Army hospital and then was honorably discharged. But for him, that was devastating, because he wanted to be out there contributing to the war effort. And here he was laying in a hospital, for months. And then basically, discharged, but kicked out because they're like, well, we can't, you got an injury. We can't do anything with you. So go home, get out of here. And then he spent some time farming, but that desire to help didn't go away. And the interesting thing is for a man who graduated with a class of 12 from Urbana Local, which doesn't mean anything to our listeners, but was basically a one building K through 12 tiny classroom. He never went to college and he kept pushing as a farmer for the Farm Bureau
Right.
to become better at communicating all of this information that they kept finding out. All these studies that were being done. And you're talking, 60s and 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s, all this stuff happening. And he's like, man, people need to know this stuff. Nobody knows he's with all these farmers in the county. And it's like, they don't know this stuff, and they'd be so much better at farming if we shared this information. So
Right.
he, through the Farm Bureau, got hooked up with Nationwide, and convinced them to start a communications company. And so they owned around 20 to 30 radio stations.
Right.
And they broadcasted all over the state of Ohio and the region. And that's how they started getting all this information out to
the farmers.
Right, to the farmers.
What they needed to do to run a better business.
Yep.
Yep.
And then, basically not out of his own doing, but the Nationwide board was so impressed with him, they asked him to be the chairman
There you go.
of a Fortune 100 company with no college degree.
Right.
Who was a farmer.
Yeah. Well,
basically.
But he had a good idea.
Right. So I think that's and then of course you look at what I do today, and it's,
there's that connection.
There's that connection to communications for sure. It goes back a way.
Well, this one always gets me in trouble, but it has to do with sitting down at the table before. And, most people want to say some kind of words over the food before they partake. And my grandpa, because the first story I told was about my granddad. But my grandpa, this was the first time I think that my wife, ever went back home with me. When I say back home, I mean going to Missouri. And my grandpa, and they're from, really from the hills. And, but never a truer soul was born. And his wife was my grandma was she was something else. She was always griping at him and on him, and just never cut him any slack. And she's scurrying around the kitchen if she finally gets all the food on the table, because she's trying to impress, because the oldest grandson has brought his future bride to the family, and so she's getting the royal treatment,
Oh, yeah.
And we sit down and she looks at me, she goes, Fred, you need to say grace. And, he's like, whatever. He was so laid back. He just went with the flow. He looked around. He goes, well, Grace and Roland, you didn't see the prospects, dig in. And Grace and Roland were two cousins from the family, but he was like, it was like, she was trying to make it all formal and everything. And that wasn't that side of my family. They were very down to earth, would do anything for you kind of people, but they were just very down to earth. They weren't big on social to-dos, and here she was trying to make it a big social to-do. And grandpa just sits down and he looks at my future wife and he goes, well, Grace and Roland didn't see the prospects, dig in. And that was it. And grandma was fit to be tied. She was throwing her dish towel and she was so mad at him. And my wife she kind of grinned under her, and covered her face because she didn't want to get in trouble. She goes, that was really cool. He just diffused the whole situation. I said, that's him. That's what he does,
That's what brings us the friendly redneck liberal.
That's it. Right. That's where that comes from, just down home, down to earth, good people, just wanting to get along with folks and help out, didn't have anything, but would give you the shirt off his back if you needed one. And again, that's a phrase maybe that our young folks there in the booth have never heard of, giving somebody the shirt off your back.
Yeah.
But that was just the way it was. That's just what happened. And I remember you talk about being here on and doing things. My other grandfather, my granddad, he would go down and he was a deacon in the church. And there would be a snowstorm where today we cancel church, right? We can't, we do all this. And he would go down and open the church for the hour that it was supposed to be open. And my grandma would say, you're going to break your neck to get there. And he goes, if somebody needs help in a storm like this, where are they going to go? They're going to go to the church.
Right.
Somebody needs to be there because they know the church is open. And I think about that all the time when we see now, we have to close this and we have to close that. And if the church was supposed to be open, and he didn't think anybody else would get there, he would make it his business to be there and open the doors and sit there. And as far as I know, nobody ever came and the phone never rang, for anybody looking for help. Yep. But it was like somebody might need help. So I'm going to be there in case it's necessary.
Yep. Good stories. Hopefully more to come. We would like to know your stories. So please do share them with us. If you go to thestateofus.org, you can check out the article from today's episode, The Benefits of Retelling Family Stories. And you can also connect with us. Links to social media can be found at the website. Lance, we've challenged people to tune in this year, yes?
Yes, we have.
And if you're listening to us on Thanksgiving or just around the holidays this year, we would be very grateful if you would help us spread the mission of the State of Us, right? Good way to start the new year is with a conversation, a respectful and open conversation, yes?
Yes.
So if you're going to ask or invite other people to tune in, where would you tell them to listen?
Well, you can use Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, or anywhere else fine podcasts are found.
For the State of Us on TrueChat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change.